Hey, what is going on, guys? So it's finally time to get to the custom sleeving on this build. So if you missed episode 1, this is going to be a new water-cooled build that we're doing on the channel. So this is the NZXT H400i. It's a bit of a refresh. We've got an 8700K that's been deleted in there and it's been overclocked, and a 1080 Ti, 32 gigs of RAM. And yeah, basically if you missed episode 2, you can check that out right up here. And so episode 2, we will be doing all of the custom sleeving. So these will be the custom sleeves from the power supply all the way to each component. So we're not using extensions here. Now this won't be a tutorial or a how-to or really even a guide. I will just be sort of doing a bit of a time lapse here, showing you guys sort of the end result and the process. But if you want to see how I do this in depth and how to get the best results, I will leave a link also in the top right hand corner. So definitely go and check that out. Now we're not going to tackle all of this tonight because it is quite late, 11 p.m. So I will try and tackle the CPU cable today, and maybe the GPU cable as well. Depends how we're going for time. But all right, without further ado, let's go ahead and start on that CPU cable. And the sleeving that we're using and what I've used for the last 4 custom builds that I've done is Mod 1. So Mod 1 produces really good PET sleeving, or they source it. Really high quality stuff, and it just binds really well to the wire. This is their shade 19, so it'll suit the really neutral theme sort of build that we're going for here. And yeah, so CPU cable, it's going to wrap around here, down here, and then to the PSU. And let's begin. Alright, so the CPU 8-pin cable is finally done. As you can see, it comes through here. The NZXT H series, something I love about them, and what I mentioned in the first episode, is that they have these routing channels here, and one for the 24-pin here. So for the CPU 8-pin, it's nice and snug behind this sort of shroud here. Fits into this nice little runway. I've also added some cable combs, one here, one at the top, and one down the bottom. And then here, there's no cable combs. It basically just splits to the pin out of the power supply. And overall, really happy with the length. Pretty easy so far. From the inside, that's what it looks like. Oh, hang on, let me just boost the exposure for a little bit. So you can't really see it. It's kind of tucked in there behind the fan, but that's kind of how I want it for this build. I want the cables to sort of be unassuming and sort of not really popping out. Now, the next one that we're going to do is the GPU 8-pin and 6-pin. So this one's going to be a little bit tricky, and I honestly really haven't decided on where I'm going to route it. So here is what sort of NZXT wants you to do with the GPU cables. And if you're using a stock power supply and stock cables, this will be no problem at all. And I've I have been using stock cables and it fits through there fine. The problem is that when you use custom cables, so for example, if I put my cable combs here, which are the 6-pin and the 8-pin, you can see that it shows us that the 8-pin and 6-pin power cable will not fit through that hole. It's just too wide. If you want to sort of overlap them and squash them together, you could certainly do it, but that's not something that I want to do for this build. The other problem is that the exit for the cables is here, and then the entry for, you know, where it goes to the power supply is over here. So what you would end up having is this sort of diagonal, sort of weird cable runway, which I don't want. There's another option, and that's to run the cables down the back there. That's the second option, and then the third option is to actually run the cables back this way and then through the back there, and that's probably what I might end up doing. I might take a few minutes to decide and maybe look at a few other builds online and see what I decide on. Alright, so I've put in the custom cables from my previous build, Fusion 2 in the NKSM1. So some of you guys might see these cables and think they're a little bit familiar. And I'm just testing a couple options here. So this was the second option. This is going this way and then back to the compartment. I did try squeezing it through here, but it just looked too weird. What ended up happening there was the cables were too wide and then it just looked like it was squeezing into this narrow compartment. I haven't tried the third option, which is going over the top, but I don't think I will. Honestly, I am really happy with that sort of look, but hopefully it will look a little bit cleaner with this sleeving. And yeah, let's get started. Alright, so the GPU cable is done, and I've got to say it looks a lot better than I thought it would. I thought it would look a little bit weird, sort of disappearing into the back there and going off on an angle, but I think it looks really nice. Let me know what you guys think of it down below. I think starting to work on these cables is really bringing the whole build together, and I can't wait until we start water cooling and putting the hardline tubing in. So a closer look at this. 6-pin and the 8-pin are separate, and I've got a pair of cable combs, one here for each cable and then one further down, and I'll show you what it looks like from the back, and that's basically what it looks like from the other side. So nice and clean, custom length cables. They come straight from the back there, and then they just wrap straight into the power supply. They sort of disappear in there. Overall, things are looking pretty well, but we have done the easiest cables first. The hardest cable by far is definitely going to be the motherboard 24-pin, and I hope I have enough sleeving and wire to complete it. I will do the measuring in a second, but just a bit of planning here. I am planning on using this cable routing channel along with the Velcro straps, but if you see the motherboard 24-pin here, we can see that it is a bit too wide. So I mean, I'm not sure what I'm going to do at this point. I think I will still try and route it through the channel. but hopefully we can get it to fit and still look nice and tidy, just like the other cables. You know, just as I had my doubts with the GPU cable, hopefully things turn out well with this motherboard 24 pin. So let's get started on that one. Alright guys, so we're slowly making some progress on these custom cables. We've pretty much done the 24 pin. We're about 80% of the way there. We're just in the middle of routing it at the moment. So I've got it plugged into the board. I've routed it through here and it's come out here. So we've got two options for routing the 24 pin. And the reason we're considering a second option here is because, you know, this is the first option. I'm not really happy with it, if I'm completely honest. It comes out nicely from the cable comb and then it just turns into a bit of a mess where everything's just sort of strapped together and it's all cramped. And yeah, I really visualized it to be sort of like the CPU cable where it's all nicely routed and it's nice and clean. So this is the first option, and the second option is this here. So I'm not really sure what we can work with here. So this would be sort of a more routed sort of look, but again, we have these routing channels here which I really want to make use of, and they're sort of going to waste, but at the end of the day they're just not wide enough to fit this 24 pin cable. I think what I'm going to try and do is remove this plastic tab here so there's actually enough room for the whole cable to fit in. So let's try that. Alright, so I've decided to get rid of the cable routing channels altogether. As much as I love them in these cases, they just do not fit for this build at all because the 24 pin cable and the cable combs are just way too wide. So new plan is to go with this sort of routing, which I think looks a lot better. I'm going to add another cable comb down the bottom, and then we'll sort of wrap this down the bottom to the power supply and then get to the wiring. Alright guys, so this is what we're working with for the final sort of air build. I have tried to clean up the front IO section as much as I can. I was actually planning on re-sleeving a lot of these connectors. So we've got some fan connectors, I've got a splitter or two, LED, USB, and there's also a SATA port, SATA connector there as well. The sleeving that I've got, the diameter is just way too small to get around a lot of those connectors. So I think I might skip that for now, but let me know what you guys think. Should I sleeve this or just leave them how they are? Let me know down below. I'm really happy with the rest of it though. I think the motherboard 24 pin looks excellent and the CPU cable also looks pretty good. And let's have a look at the front. So on the front, things are pretty tidy as well. And some of you are probably thinking, you know, where are all the cables? You can see the GPU cable, but you can't see anything else. I didn't really want the cables to be standing out and taking away from all of the other components, and certainly not the custom loop that we'll be putting in just about a week or two actually. So here's the GPU cable, turned out pretty well. Goes in through the back there. Motherboard 24 pin is hidden behind the shroud. And then the CPU 8 pin is hiding back there. So overall, pretty nice looking sort of air build. I did also finish the power cable here for the 2.5-inch SSD. It's not in there at the moment because it's, you know, it doesn't suit the current build. But there's a sleeving there. It's nothing special, and it will actually be hidden behind this shroud here for the most part. So guys, that's going to do it for episode 2 of this build, and I'm pretty happy with how things have turned out so far. If you're not already, make sure you are subscribed, because episode 3, we'll be putting in that custom loop, fitting the radiators, doing all the hardline tubing. I'm going to show all of that, as well as putting in the coolant. As always guys, a huge thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.